Okay, so I wasn't going to make a video about Disclosure Day, but given the discourse around this movie, and there has been quite a bit, I decided to make a video because I feel like this movie is representing a bit of a change in the industry. I've said multiple times in other videos that I feel like we are still in an age of cynicism where people are kind of stuck in this mode of they got to criticize a movie. Any movie that pretends to be smart on any level, we have to criticize it and pick it apart. The only movies we will not pick apart are the ones that are dumb and they're not pretending to be anything remarkable. But it's interesting because this movie is so polarizing, but it really shouldn't be. One of the best pieces of evidence of this is Masters of the Universe and Disclosure Day had the exact same cinema score, which means like the people who actually went and saw the movie liked it at about the same rate. And yet one of them is turning out to be a box office failure while the other one, Disclosure Day, is actually doing pretty okay. And it seems to be getting mixed to positive reviews. So, but a lot of the discourse is really intense. People either really loved it or they really hated it. And once again, I see this attitude of if you liked it, there's something wrong with you. So I thought I would do a video giving you my review of this movie. I figured I'd share my likes and dislikes, do that whole thing. So I figured I do have a lot to say about this movie. Needless to say, I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think it's a masterpiece, but I also don't think it's a dud. Some people have called it trash. I don't understand what they're talking about. There are things in this movie that I think most directors would only dream of being able to pull off. So I do think Spielberg has still got it. He came out of retirement just to make this movie, so you can tell that he spent a little bit more time on it than he probably does on his movies these days. But yeah, overall, it's just been kind of weird because like I have some friends whose opinions I really deeply respect who have said this movie's garbage. Like it is a huge hot mess. It was like a 6-year-old was asked to write a movie for adults. And I think that's unnecessarily harsh. Like I went and saw it at the theater here in my hometown, and it actually got a small standing ovation. Not everybody, but like at least a good half the theater. And I would say maybe 2/3 of the theater was packed. And it was on a Sunday night. So that never happens around here. I heard at least one guy say, hell yeah. I can't remember the last time somebody shouted at a movie the second the credits started to roll. But needless to say, there are people who really enjoyed this movie. But again, there are people who just hated this movie. So with all that in mind, I'm just going to get into my review. Overall, I think it was a great movie. Is it his best? Absolutely not. But before I get to the things I liked, the things that I completely agree with people on, the plot is kind of a mess. I think the first 20 minutes is fine, but then like for about an hour, it just kind of like becomes a chase movie that doesn't really need to be as long as it is. I get that the chase movie is a format that Spielberg is very comfortable in. His very first film, Duel, was a chase movie. So I get that the desire to make this a chase movie it makes sense to him. Supposedly, this movie went through like 40 drafts before they got to the end, and I'm sure that at some point Spielberg was like, "Why don't you just make it more of a chase movie?" Which, fine. But there are things in it that just don't make any sense. I think characters make a lot of weird decisions. There are plot holes. I also feel like the bad guy is not as bad as he could be. Whenever that happens, I always think of like Wizard of Oz, how the Wicked Witch is like supposedly all powerful, but all she ever does in that movie is just watch Dorothy just go to Oz and just cackle basically and not really do anything until the very end. And so sometimes when I think the bad guy is like not really doing anything, I like he does stuff in this movie and there are some scenes that are spectacular, but I also think that the heroes kind of escape too easily. Sometimes I feel like they have plot armor. I think that criticism is totally valid. Also, the dialogue is a little weird in some places. Like there are certain lines where I'm just kind of like, you probably could have just completely not have him said that. Because like sometimes when you're looking at dialogue, if the character says what's happening, it's kind of on the nose. And I feel like the characters do that at times in this movie. I'm also not a huge fan of the fact that they used CGI for the animals. I think that was a golden opportunity to use actual animals or at least practical effects for some of the shots. And the CGI was not great at certain times. And the last point against the film, I would say, would be the main character. I feel like we didn't get to know her enough. I feel like we got a little bit, the fact that she's bouncing around from different cities and her boyfriend just kind of wants to settle down, it seems, but she doesn't, she seems restless. But that's about all we get from her character. And then the rest of it, she's almost like possessed. So we don't really know anything about her. And I would have liked to know a little bit more about her. Now, what I liked overall is the whole concept of using empathy as like a superhero doesn't sound as silly as you think. Like when you actually see it play out, there are certain scenes where the character just sort of gets out of the situation by purely the power of just reaching deep into a person's soul and finding what's there and then just getting out of the situation that way. I don't think I've seen that done. Maybe it's been done. I don't know. But like, I think the action was spectacular, even though a lot of it was a bit unnecessary or it went on too long. Spielberg knows how to do action. The whole train sequence, totally unnecessary. But then again, if you think about most action sequences in most action movies, a lot of the action sequences are unnecessary. So that's something where I'm just going to throw it a bone. Also, John Williams' music is fantastic. It's not as memorable as some of his other scores, obviously, like Jaws or E.T. or whatever, where you can just like hum it in your mind. But there are some scenes where the scene works because of the music. Like the music really just makes it take on another level. And it just really does. When people say this is classic Spielberg, a lot of it involves the music. I also like that it felt more like a cinematic experience than a lot of big blockbuster movies, and I think that is to Spielberg's credit. I think he still remembers how things used to be. I think he's still got it. And of course, the best thing has got to be the third act. I mean, there's some clunky things that happen to get us into the third act, some plot contrivances, but once we get there, it's worth the payoff, in my opinion. Like everyone's talking about Courtney Grace. If you don't know who she is or why anybody's talking about her, I'm not even going to tell you what it is. I would just say watch the movie. But it was a surprise, and I'm not going to lie, I almost cried. And I've actually seen a lot of people online post that they almost cried or that they did cry, and it's because of just all the buildup. Some people thought that it was a little bit too late. Like all the chase stuff and the stuff about the speculating about the aliens and the stuff involving the alien artifacts that we don't really entirely understand how they work and stuff like that. But once you get to the end, like if you stick it out, the payoff is incredible. And I honestly would have liked that whole section to be longer, and I think it absolutely could have been. The other thing that I think I'm not actually sure if it's a like or a dislike was the religion subplot, because religion features heavily in this movie. And, once again, I feel like Spielberg has a knack for taking a sensitive subject like religion and handling it with care. Like he's not going to just make this an action movie. Like he's very well aware that if this was to happen, it would be a huge crisis for some people. And he takes pains to have that represented in the movie. I'm not entirely sure that I was moved by all of it, that aspect of it. And once again, I think Spielberg deserves credit for taking on a very difficult topic like that and incorporating it into a summer blockbuster and almost just doing it like he's riding a bike. Like it's just so easy for him to make a movie like this. So overall, I think the script could have used a little bit of a rewrite in certain places. I think the structure could have been slightly different. It's not boring, though. I don't think I was bored at all from this movie. I think maybe there were a couple of scenes that went on a little bit too long with the talking. And there were some things that were a little bit confusing, or maybe it's just not what I would have expected from what was happening in that scene or whatever. But overall, I think he gets there, and I think the ending redeems the whole movie. So, I'm kind of in the good, not great camp with this movie. I think I gave it 4 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. So that's still pretty good. That's actually really good, I think. But it's obviously not a 5. Again, it's one of those movies that I think a lot of people are just destined to hate a movie like this because it's got such a soft, squishy center. That's really what it is. Spielberg has that soft, squishy center to all of his movies. He brings out the sentimentality. It's an optimistic take on the whole alien thing. Once again, we're very used to seeing the cynical take on this. But then again, Close Encounters came out within a few years of Watergate, which was also a very dark time for our country. So for a movie like this to be coming out with everything going on in the world, with how divided everybody is and all that stuff, it makes sense. It's a movie that I almost feel like there's a lot of different ways that Spielberg could have gone with this movie, but I definitely think he's making a very strong statement that if we ever are going to be ready for full disclosure, we need to get our shit together. I think that's what, more than anything, that's the thing that I got from this movie was Spielberg in the strongest sense possible saying, are you guys even ready for full disclosure? So yeah, I really liked this movie. Those are the reasons why I liked it, even despite all of the flaws, which I just went into. It doesn't help that this is a sci-fi, and I think sci-fi fans are even harder to impress, and they're almost impossible to impress. And I get that. I can be that way sometimes too, where I just want all the science to make sense, and if it doesn't all make sense, then I just get up. I at least wonder. But like some people, it's just not enough. Like you do one wrong thing and it takes them out of it, and then they hate you for the entire movie. And I think a lot of people did that. They saw one too many plot contrivances or things that didn't make sense, or one too many lines of dialogue that just didn't work, and it took them out of it, and they were just out of it for the whole time. And so they missed out, in my opinion, on the marvelous thing that happens at the end of the movie where it all comes together. So yeah, that's my take. I'm going to be interested to see, when you combine this with some of the other movie phenomenons that have happened this year, such as Project Hail Mary and the 2 indie horror movies that are doing really well, Obsession and Backrooms, and all of the buzz that's happening with people wanting new original movies, which this is, by the way. Everybody complains that Hollywood doesn't make original movies, but then when it does, they pick it apart. It's like, you just can't make some people happy. But I'm here for it. I always go into every movie with an open mind. I went into this movie with an open mind. And if you want to enjoy it, I say go into it with an open mind. Stick it out to the end, and I think you'll be rewarded. Don't hate watch it. If you hate watch it, it will ruin the ending for you. Or just don't watch it. Just whatever the last Spielberg movie it was that you saw that you liked, let that be the last one. And that's fine too. To each their own. But that's where I'm at. So that's what I think of Disclosure Day.